Hello and welcome, my friends. Today's episode is deeply personal for me because over the last month, I've been experiencing significant pain and connected to my epigastric hernia that I actually was born with. And what's been fascinating and honestly humbling is realizing how many years I ignored what my body was trying to tell me. I think sometimes symptoms don't fully disappear. They simply stop screaming loudly enough for us to pay attention. And lately, the detoxification process my body has been going through, I feel like old injuries, old weaknesses, old patterns are finally being brought to the surface to be addressed more consciously. And actually, the body resists change. Deep detox, healing, the body wants to return to the patterns that have been well established, even if those are unhealthy patterns. And one simple shift this week, a change in the way I stood and walked, completely changed the pain pattern in my body almost immediately. That experience opened the door to today's conversation because posture, movement, core engagement, structural support, impact far more than most people realize. They impact digestion, breathing, nervous system regulation, organ support, detoxification, even the flow of energy through the body, I notice changes. And today we're going to explore all of that. Welcome back to the Healing Inquiry. I am Christina Sergun Powers, and this space is really about asking deeper questions, reconnecting with our bodies, and learning how to work with our body's wisdom instead of constantly overriding it. And today I am so excited to welcome someone very, very special to this conversation. DL Powers is a Pilates instructor, a studio owner and practitioner with over 25 years of experience helping people restore strength, alignment, mobility, and body awareness. And yes, she is also my sister. I'm truly honored to have her here with me today and to share her knowledge and wisdom with all of you. As always, if you're joining live, please share your questions and thoughts in the chat throughout this episode. We'd love to respond live. And if you're watching the replay, leave your comments below. I truly enjoy hearing and experiencing what you've reflected on. I respond to them all. DL, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you sound great, looking great. Before we dive into the Pilates discussion itself, I want to share a little context for why this conversation became so important to me recently. As many of you know, I've been going through a deep healing and detoxification process this year. And since completing my deep Panchakarma cleanse, I've noticed my body bringing forward areas of weakness and unresolved tissue stress. And I think this had existed for many years. And one of those areas is this epigastric hernia point. And when I really reflected on it, I realized I've been experiencing signs from this area for decades and ignoring it. And I can remember discomfort after long drives, amid back pain, periods where my back would completely go out, and tension patterns that radiated outward from this one central point. And years ago, I was seeing a massage therapist. Without even knowing I had a hernia, she placed her hand directly on this area where my hernia is and said, "This is the weakest part of your body." And at that time, that deeply stayed with me. But recently, during a painful flare-up, DL gave me a very simple adjustment to shift my weight more into the heels while walking and stop lifting so much from the sternum, which was what I was patterned to do for many decades. And almost immediately, I felt my upper abdominal muscles begin engaging differently, which dramatically reduced the pain immediately. And what shocked me was realizing I had been walking in a compensatory pattern for most of my life. Sometimes healing begins not with something dramatic, but with becoming aware of patterns the body has carried for years. So DL, I'd love for you to first share a little about your own journey. What was the most important moments where you truly understood the power of Pilates in supporting people's health and well-being?
Gosh, well, pretty early on when I started teaching, there's some strange noises going about here. Pretty early on when I started teaching, I I remember people saying, you, even my instructor that I did my training with would say, you love Pilates more than anyone I know. Um, and still, all these years later, I still love it. I still am enthused to talk about it because of what you mentioned earlier, just how good it is for any body. Um, when I first started doing it, people hadn't heard of Pilates. It was kind of starting to be popular in Hollywood among the stars. And so you'd hear about them doing Pilates. Um, but when I realized how I was working for the airlines at the time, in a seated position at a desk, and people would always comment on how great my posture was. But once you learn, once you know something, you can't not know. So they'd say, "Oh, Pilates instructor, I want to sit like this, but Pilates instructors want me to sit like this," and it feels awkward in the beginning, but that becomes your new normal. And so for me, all these years later, my new normal is that. And I think just knowing that every body can benefit from it. I've worked with people with Parkinson's, osteoporosis, all kinds of different, really, really people that were challenged by their physical, as opposed to people that were dancers and incredibly fit and just wanting to augment their already pretty active lifestyle. So it's really great. It's a pretty great practice. Anywhere, it's like yoga, which I know you know, that you can do anywhere that your human body can fit, even though I have all the fancy equipment. I love that you can do it anywhere, so it can travel with you if you have a travel lifestyle. If you're home and you're not feeling well, there's always something you can do. Um, I mean, movement wise, but specifically Pilates offers several.
Yeah, I mean everything you just said, I can't wait till we dive deeper in, because I think it's really going to hit a lot of our audience. I think many of our audience has probably come in contact with Pilates. I think all of our audience probably has heard of Pilates. Maybe not everybody has tried it. And just like for me, the only times I've come in contact with for you over the years, and I just noticed the very, very subtle but tremendously beneficial experiences in the body and the nervous system, everything. We're going to talk about that today. And something that's really surprised me recently is realizing what I thought was good posture. Like you said, I'm, attuned to yoga. I was trained as a dancer, so I had that kind of a stance as a young person, which I think is more aligned with the Pilates, like engaging those dancer muscles. And I want to share an experience that I had just recently when I recognized that. But we may not actually be presenting balanced posture when we think we are. I've always focused on lengthening my spine, lifting upward, holding myself upright from the sternum point. But over the last few months, especially during this detoxification process, I started noticing how often I bend forward throughout the day. And honestly, it seemed easier to let my abdominal muscles relax and overuse my back muscles instead. And even something as simple as cooking at my stove, which feels like it's built for somebody who's much, much shorter than I am, and the way my body naturally moves, started making me aware of how frequently I collapse forward. And once I changed my walking stance, I realized how little I had truly been engaging those upper abdominal muscles correctly, and actually the gluteal muscles. Because that's kind of what you were really talking about. So DL, can you explain what may actually be happening structurally and muscularly in this situation I described?
Yeah. So you mentioned doing something like cooking and leaning over, and
Yeah, I was doing a lot of collapsing forward, like collapsing forward with the dishwasher. Whenever I was just collapsing forward from the hips, And I think that has aggravated, in part aggravated this current situation I was working with.
Yeah. Yeah. So very simple. We can think about it just in, if we're just forward of our center, that's going to put weight on all of our front body muscles, right? And because I gave you that simple, just shift back and see, you notice right away your glutes and your back body muscles engaged. And so when you're going forward and letting abdominals relax, what's happening is, you said it, it's putting strain and stretching out those back muscles, pulling them away from your spine. I hope I'm not getting too complicated, but ideally we just want to share balance. And so we want to strengthen so that our structure is in line. And I usually explain structure to people like 3 units. Your pelvis is your base unit if you're standing up or laying down. And then your rib cage is your second unit, and your head would be that third unit. So those 3 things, you don't want to be your forward with that rib cage and head, because then there's the strain. Very few people lean too far back. If you try and lean back and feel like you're leaning back, that's probably a good thing. If you're, but ideally you want your shoulder joints over your hip joints, and you want your abdominal muscles pulling closer to your spine to support your spine always, because that should be a foundation. If your foundation is like this, it's not as strong. It's leaving out this thing. It's kind of leaning on this front body. But if you have it like this and you're walking around, you have this strong foundation, right? Does that make sense?
100%. And it's like everything you explained was everything I was doing wrong. And I noticed, like I said, from my dancer training, I go, okay, let me engage my gluteal muscles, because I was having a hard time, as I said, engaging those abdominal muscles because of that tear. It's, very weakened muscular structure. But all of a sudden, I was able to gauge the abdominal muscles better. I was able to, like you said, you can't lean back far enough. So I was really leaning back, and I kind of looked in the mirror and I go, well, that looks pretty good. That doesn't even look like I'm overcompensating. And it was just, I remember I was also trained in gymnastics as a young person. And when we do gymnastics and we do the back bends and we do the flips, you push the hips forward.
Yeah.
And, I remember, as a young person all the way up through, my early 20s when I was dancing, it felt so good for my body to engage in that dancer way with the glutes and the core and everything. And I don't remember having any issues with my hernias at that time, my hernia, the one. And I was like, oh, as soon as I started kind of doing what you had told me to do by, you said sink down and put your weight into the glutes, I was like, oh, wow, what a difference, and what a body memory. But it's very simple and easy, but because my body has been patterned over the last few decades not to do that, or hasn't been doing that, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work and a lot of energetic work. But it's, like I've said in many different episodes, we need to repattern the body to have, like you said, a new normal. And I think this is such an important conversation, because many people probably don't realize how much chronic pain patterns, fatigue, weakness can stem from these long-term compensatory patterns, overcompensating. So the body will always compensate for weakness somewhere, but eventually those compensation patterns create new stress and new imbalance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you want to say anything?
I'm agreeing with you. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's like suddenly the curtains have been opened when you were just saying these things. It was just amazing. And something else I noticed almost immediately after shifting my stance, when you gave me that suggestion and those directions, which were clear, I mean, I understand why you're such an excellent teacher, was that walking suddenly felt almost massaging my large intestines and colon. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, this is incredibly important, because Ayurveda teaches that many disease patterns begin in the colon: improper elimination, nutrient absorption, stagnation, constipation, accumulation of toxins. And what fascinated me was feeling how movement and posture directly affected the body mechanically in this way. So DL, can you talk about the kinds of structural movement changes that actually support digestion and bowel functions.
Well, can you say that one more time? Repeat that.
Yeah, because I noticed that the changes that you made, I could feel like it was massaging my colon. And so this, is very important in Ayurveda. The colon is, we call it the seat of disease. And so it was beginning, like I felt it was bringing a new oxygenated flow, it was bringing a new blood supply flow as I had changed the way in which I walked and the way in which I stand based on your directions. So in your experience, is these structural changes that you teach your students and the movement changes, do they actually support the digestion and the bowel function?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah.
Be specific how to tell people. I'm like, well, each person is a little different. What I would tell one person to do, like movement wise, based on what their patterns are that you mentioned and where I established their weakness, which isn't probably everybody in the hernia where yours was. It may be a little different, but across the board, those little shifts, when we can identify, for you, it was just that simple to do something like that to get an immediate, really big response, is that it basically clears blockages in the simplest way of saying it. And you mentioned oxygenation and of the blood and the colon being able to function properly. Yes, that's just a really simple, if you don't understand that you're moving in an improper way, you don't understand. I think once we understand as individuals and find out, oh, if I just move my shoulder back and down, it alleviates all this neck pressure I've had. But before, we just thought that, maybe our shoulders are supposed to be up to our ears. So yeah, when our bodies are so amazing, as you know, with listening to them in the healing process, it works the same physically with movement, and the feet hurting or anything, little small micro changes make a big difference. But it's like also anything else, just that re-practicing, depending on how long you've patterned that improper imbalance. If you just do a small little thing, whatever it is for you that has been determined where you're off and you find your new normal, just practice that. Just practicing that small little shift has that immediate feeling of, oh wow, this is the way I'm meant to be. But I also think I told you, like, treat those shifts like little baby deer muscles, because if they've been inactive for a long time, a very small amount of work feels like a lot of work as you grow it. So did I answer your question or did I go?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, exactly. Because I think I was telling you before we came on live, I said, I might be a little off, because even though physically my body is feeling better every single day since you and I talked about the suggestions, my energy, it's not quite where it should be, because I notice how much effort I'm putting into making sure that I'm standing and walking in the right way. And it's like, okay, I have to rest more than normal, because it is a lot of energy until you notice that it's not.
Right. Until you get through, like, anything, that learning curve of things. Whenever we start anything new, for me, I'm not great with digital or computer things. So anytime I start something new, it takes me a really long time. But Pilates, I got you there.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. And this really highlights how interconnected the body is, because we often separate digestion, movement, posture, nervous system function. I mean, I know from an instructor point of view, you and I don't do that, but most of the clients we serve, most of the people we serve, they see those systems as very separate. Like, if I have a movement problem, it doesn't affect my digestion, or if I have a posture issue, it's not affecting my nervous system, when in reality, they're all communicating constantly. I mean, the body is whole. And when there is something out of balance, something else is going to go out of balance, and it's not completely separate. Breathing has also been a major focus throughout this healing process for me. And in earlier episodes, I discussed how deeply the breath impacts the nervous system. stress responses and healing capacity. And one thing I've noticed recently is when posture shifts and core muscles engage differently, my breathing capacity changed almost immediately. And I can take deeper breaths because with the hernia situation, it was also stagnant, shortening my breath capacity. And as soon as I changed that stance, suddenly it opened up that ability to breathe deeply again. And I can hold the breath more comfortably. I can feel the nervous system regulating much faster. Because often the deep shift happens during those deep inhales, pauses, the exhales. That's when our nervous system shifts from a nervous reaction system to coming back to homeostasis and calm. DL, can you explain how posture, muscle engagement, and core stability influence breathing and nervous system regulation?
Yeah, that's a good. So one of the things I used to say all the time in my classes that students had said, I hear your voice when I was out on a hike. I could hear you saying. One thing I would say, well, breath is the first principle of Pilates. It's the first thing we do in life, and it's the last thing we do in life. It's the one thing we all need to do. If I wake up, my very first thing when I wake up in gratitude is I'm so grateful for the fresh, clean air I have to breathe. And then second, water. Third is optimal health. Those are the first three things I wake up to and go to sleep to, because I know without air and water, well, it doesn't really matter what other problems I have. If I don't have those two things. So breath is so important, and most of us don't breathe right, but we have to do it our whole life. It is our first and last thing, and it fuels us so much that there's so many different kinds of breath styles that I've learned over the years that you also know that have different benefits. But most of us, when I go to the doctor to get a checkup and the doctor says, take a deep breath, I'll start to breathe in, and I'm only like a fraction into my breath, and the doctor goes, and take another one. And I was like, well, that wasn't a deep breath. But most people, breathe like, and it's just in the chest, right?
Yeah.
But what it does, it goes back to that oxygenation. And when we're breathing, we're allowing our whole systems to feel it. I think you mentioned this the other day when you were breathing, right? Was it you that told me? No, it wasn't you. That you cracked yourself or gave yourself that wasn't you, was it?
Yeah, no, it was me.
It was
I
you.
said when I was paying attention to this hernia and I was changing the way I breath, I could feel my spine cracking.
Yeah, like
and adjusting.
Your breath. And
Yeah.
then if you do that with you also mentioned that your weakness that you determined was deep. A lot of us, unless we've learned or trained at some point, the deeper muscles to be activated. Sometimes when you see people that are maybe very muscular, and look like they really put a lot of effort into they've sometimes left out those deeper weakers. Not everybody, but Pilates is about training from the inside out in all directions, so not leaving anything out. We wouldn't just do like biceps and back or a old thing I remember. Breath really affects your core strength by fueling you. It has so many benefits. You just can't go wrong with getting a nice deep breath. So a real easy breath for people to do is to breathe in for 5 counts to yourself, like, and try and breathe out for 5 counts. Then you go right back in. Do it one more time just for fun. 5 counts in. And out. Okay, so I think like anyone, if you ever want to just breathe 3 times, if you're feeling stressed, you mentioned the nervous system, you can immediately feel your nervous system. Just those 3 easy breaths. And it's simple, a 5 count in, a 5 count out. Yes, there's many different types of breathing, but that one's just a real simple one if you're at work, you're somewhere in your day, you're driving in traffic or whatever the thing is where you feel like I'm stressed. And that's the first principle of Pilates. It's our first thing in life, and it's just good on all levels, supporting ourselves. Now, if you want to take it further, hopefully when you're breathing, you're in good posture when you do that. And then it gets more complex and involved. So to keep it simple, that's just a really easy first principle of Pilates in life. Did I answer your question?
Oh, 100%, and gave us even much, much more. Thank you for that breathing exercise. I was doing it along with you. I don't know if you could tell.
Yeah, I hope you were. I was thinking.
And I'm sure our audience was too. So the breath is one of the fastest ways to communicate safety to the nervous system, and I think that is why it's so clearly impactful when we change our breathing. It says to the nervous system, you're okay. You don't need to go into fight or flight. You don't need to go into anxiety or fear. It helps it regulate back down, that there is safety. And what I really love about this conversation is that it reminds us healing is not always about adding more. Sometimes healing comes from awareness, alignment, slowing down. And I've had to do that much, much more this week. Learning how the body was designed to function and making small corrections consistently over time. And honestly, this week reminded me the body is always communicating. So the question becomes, are we listening before the body has to scream at us?
Mm-hmm.
Before we close today, I'd love to give you space, DL, for any final thoughts. What is something you really wish people understood about movement, posture, and supporting the body long term? I mean, you've given us a wealth of information already, so thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I'd probably just reiterate one thing I find, especially if people are new to Pilates and don't know much, and even if you're not, it's a good thing to remind yourself is I call it the 3 Bs. This is just something I came up with when I teach students. So the 3 Bs are back, belly, breath. And so if you check in, I mean, as many times as you want until it becomes your new normal. Where's your back? So if I'm seated right here, for instance, I don't have anything behind me, but I can imagine that I have something against me. If you do have something against you, you could press against it. But then as you breathe, those 5 or the 5 count, try and think of slowly pulling your belly button away from whatever material you feel like of your shirt. Just as you breathe, try and do those 3 breaths. Pull the belly button slowly into your back as you breathe in and out. So you don't let it go. And you might feel, if it's new, those dormant muscles feeling like uncomfortable. That's okay. Or if you're practiced at it, you'll just start to feel that deeper and deeper strength, that foundation. So it's the 3 Bs, the back, the belly, the breath, and try and just check in with them. Yeah, start once a day. See if you can, and then as many times as you like as you're walking or driving or standing in line for something, think, oh, where are my 3 Bs? My back, my belly, and my breath.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it right now, and I notice that it takes that stress off that hernia point. And I have to do it pretty much all day long, because if I don't, where my hernia point is, it's painful if I'm not constantly. So I'm probably going a little bit faster than what you suggested about taking little steps, because for me, it's a pain point. It's like my body's screaming.
You should listen to that. Like, definitely, whenever you're exactly. So one of the things I'm most appreciative of is the conversation I've developed with my body over the years. So when it says something, I listen because I know I don't want it to get to stage 4 being like, hello.
DEFCON 4.
Wait, I think it's definitely the worst one.
Yeah, well, I'm probably at DEFCON 3 right now, because it's improved.
That's good.
It was definitely at the worst. Thank you so much for being with us today. I truly hope today's conversation encourages you to become more aware of your own body, your movement patterns, your posture, your breath, and the subtle ways the body communicates every single day. Because healing is often much more interconnected than we realize. And sometimes the smallest shifts create the biggest changes over time. If this conversation resonates at all with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with someone who you think may benefit from it. And if you're watching live, we'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your reflections in the chat. Or if you're watching the replay, leave a comment below. Think about this, reflect on this. Have you ever noticed posture or movement patterns affecting your pain, breathing, digestion, or energy? And just comment and reflect below if you feel called to. Thank you again for joining us on the Healing Inquiry. I want to just give a shout out to where DL is. I mean, she's a fabulously well-recognized Pilates instructor. She's coming from Seattle, the Columbia City neighborhood, very well known, very booked up. She only does privates now. So if you're in that area, you might want to look her up. If not, I strongly suggest, if you haven't gone on into Pilates before, if any of this resonates from you, looking at your local Pilates studio in your area. Thank you again for joining us on the Healing Inquiry. And remember, healing is not always about forcing the body. Sometimes it begins with learning how to support it properly. Just a little message, my schedule may be changing next week, and I am possibly thinking about shifting these episodes to Saturday. I will send out a clear notice before that episode airs, if that's the case. Otherwise, I will see you all next Friday at 11 a.m. Central.